So you have been in the business development strategy game for a while. How do you identify key markets to enter? You mentioned foreign direct investment, infrastructure, and things like that. But what are the key criteria you look at when you're entering new emerging markets?
Thank you, Joe. 3 decades of developing businesses in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific regions. I think what is really interesting is that it's an exciting time to be exploring opportunities in emerging markets. There are a few areas that you need to look at it. The rapid pace of technological advancement, shifting global dynamics, and the rise of new economic players have created vast opportunities in multiple sectors. And what we are seeing is from energy transition and healthcare innovations to digitalization and even the consumer growth and the rising income definitely help in consumer goods growth also in emerging markets. I think the first point for me would always be on the economic growth. So if you take a look at the emerging markets growth, projected growth for the next 5 years, it's between 4 to 6%, whereas the advanced economies, the projected growth is around 1 to 2.5% for the next 5 years. So it's a 3 to 4 times growth that is given for emerging market. And what we are seeing is definitely growth across multiple countries, but the key here is prioritization and where you want to play and how you are planning to win, because not all the markets looks the same because of the maturity of the market, the geopolitical situation, the local taxation, the legal framework, the regulatory landscape. So one would need to take a deeper understanding about what is happening in the market, including the geopolitical situation, regulatory landscape, licensing, taxation, and consumer insight is important. So I think the starting point will always be trying to understand the market that you are planning to enter. Opportunities are there, and also the most important one would be the careful assessment of the external dynamics, because all the market, as I said, is not the same. So you would need to go a little deeper. And for me, prioritization will always be important. If I have to pick up Southeast Asia, the way Vietnam is growing, that would always be a prioritized country for me. If I look at East Africa, Kenya could be a prioritization. So I think those are the specific that you need to go in, because everything looks attractive, but then you can make mistakes if you don't do the careful assessment of the market and what you want to do.
One thing I'd love to get your thoughts on, because you mentioned economic growth is one of the key factors, and obviously that plays a role in where you go. But one other factor you talk about, regulatory and this rule of law. So obviously
Yes.
in some markets, the rules are more obscure than certain
Yeah.
markets. And I imagine that plays a little bit of role, just not focusing on, once again, the growth and the opportunities, but also saying, okay, how easy it is to actually operate in this market once you actually enter it.
In my previous job, we used real win and worth before entering a market. How real is the opportunity? How can we win in that marketplace? How much worth the market is going to be? Because the entry cost can be pretty high in some of the markets, and also the entry barriers can be significant. So, as you rightly said, the legal area that you need to look at it. So, if I take a look at, I would say maybe what 7 areas. One would be consumer growth, as I already talked about, the infrastructure development, whether it is a transportation, the utilities, healthcare, the schools. I think definitely that's an area of interest for most companies, infrastructure development. What we are seeing, particularly in the last maybe 5, 6 years, is the digital transformation. Particularly many of the emerging markets, whether it is Vietnam or Indonesia or even Kenya or Nigeria, we are seeing a leapfrogging of digital transformation. Maybe the advanced economies could have taken about 20, 30 years to get the digital transformation. But what we are seeing today is a significant focus on digital transformation. That's a competitive advantage for emerging markets today. Everyone needs to look at it. Digital transformation can be in your business model on the fintech solution. It can be on the healthcare solution. It's also on the transportation. So you're seeing a lot of focus on the digital transformation. The third area is healthcare investment that is going into these countries, because as the population grow and age, there is clearly need for focused on healthcare investment in those countries. So government is putting significant effort in building hospitals and making it affordable for the population. That's another area we need to look at it. I think the fourth could be the financial inclusions. I think all this emerging market, they would like to be included in the global financial inclusion. So you're seeing fintech solutions and all this new mobile banking and all those emerging solutions are being addressed in the emerging market. I think the last one could be the manufacturing hub. If you look at countries like Vietnam, for instance, or India, or even Mexico, you are seeing a significant FDI flow into these countries because there has always been a very high dependency on China. Now, with the China situation, people are trying to diversify their supply chain into different countries and different regions. So countries like India, Vietnam, Mexico, and even East African countries or even East European countries are getting benefits out of that. So those are the specific areas one could potentially look at it.
It goes back to the products or services you're selling. If you're in the healthcare space and you're focusing on hospice care or elderly care, it makes sense to focus on those with aging populations because that's where obviously the market is. And you also said if the government is investing in those areas or if there's opportunities to invest in those, that could be an opportunity. So combining not only from a country point of view, but also tying it back to the products and services you sell.
We use the term called follow the money, where the government is investing, and that's an area to look at. In my previous job, two things that we have used. One, I have already talked about it, real win and worth. Second one is follow the money when you want to really invest in key countries, because that clearly shows where the government is investing, where the opportunities are, and you just need to follow that area. I mean, everything is not going to look attractive, but the specific segment where the government is investing money, FDIs are coming, those are the areas you are going to see positive outcomes.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about follow the money, because I think it's an interesting concept. If you look at Singapore, example, obviously not an emerging market, but their government is investing a lot in terms of AI technology, AI training, and things like that. So that could be one key area for this specific market. But tell me more, how do you actually follow the money in emerging markets? Because it's a little bit more difficult, I would say.
Yeah, I think for me, again, the good example would be India or Vietnam. If you take a look at the FDI flows in Vietnam, the manufacturing or the technology, high-tech industries are getting a lot of investment out there, whether it is the Samsungs of the world or other big companies setting up their R&D and the innovation areas. That's a focused area. Second one is the automotive. If you look at the auto electrification, you're seeing a significant investment in whether it is in India, Vietnam, or some European countries. That would be an area of interest. Healthcare is going through a transformation in artificial intelligence, patient care experience, and everything that they are looking at it. So there are areas that you would need to take a deeper look at it and see whether you have any synergy with your prioritized segment, start investing and prioritizing for the focus, because all areas are not going to give you the returns that you're looking for. So you really need to prioritize. The second thing is you are not alone in the market. The price point in some of this emerging market, product positioning can be challenging, price point can be challenging, affordability is a question mark, packaging and labels need to be different. Look at your product and services and how you can win in those market. And one challenge could be getting the local partners, because these are not matured market where you will see an organized distribution or an organized networking possible. Sometimes you need to go with the smallest family business that is available in those countries and then start building on those relationships and giving them training and development. It's a continuous improvement. When you want to enter the market, you really need to pick and choose where you play and how you are going to partner the local relationship.
That's a good point you mentioned in terms of price, because obviously price plays a major factor in many emerging markets. So let's say that you are a premium, either a consumer brand or a B2B brand, and you tend to price things a little bit higher than local players. How would you compete? You talked about having local players, localizing production, things like that. But what are some other ways in which you can compete as a premium or B2B brand in some of these price-conscious emerging markets?
Understand the market adaptability for your product. There's also cultural sensitivity, consumer behaviors, consumer insight, and a lot of areas are there. So I think the starting point would be, if you are looking at a technology product, probably a price point may not be as important as a consumer product. If you look at the consumer product, I think the packaging will play an important role. Your labels will play an important role. And also there are cultural sensitivity around the product use and other things. So I think most of the companies, they look at your tier strategy. If my entry level product for Japan is going to be premium plus, my entry level product for a country like Indonesia or Vietnam could be tier C or even tier B product. Then you start migrating up to B and C once the market start maturing. So that's a decision that you need to take. And it also comes with us because we're entering into a new market with a tier C product, your margins are going to be very thin. And that's something that you would need to accept it. And this is where a balanced approach would help, because that doesn't mean that we are going to sell only the tier C product. You would also need to start looking at how do we balance tier C product with a tier B product, and there may be opportunity for tier A product. It's a balanced approach, and the packaging is an important aspect when it comes to consumer goods. So that's what I will be looking at it when I enter the market. Look at three options: and entry-level product, a slightly higher margin with tier B. And there are specific areas, maybe there are a lot of foreign companies out there, they have a standard that they need to keep. We have to follow their standard. And that's where you will be able to offer them a tier A product or a differentiated product where you can get slightly higher margins.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of volume versus a limited supply. So, for example, if you're going mass and you have to sell $1 million, for example, then you can maybe divide that by, I don't know, 1,000 versus going at a higher tier. Maybe you focus on government or some of the multinationals that have a little bit more budget if you're going on either a premium or a B2B model.
Absolutely. The starting point for any emerging market will always be the infrastructure. That is where the significant investment, because your consumer retail and everything will come later. The way the investment normally happens is start with infrastructure, then you go into utilities, transportation, the hospitals, the education. Then as the income continue to rise for the consumer, middle class consumer, they will start looking at upgrading the product, their lifestyle, you can capitalize on that. Because you are not going to see an advanced technology in terms of whether it is a healthcare or consumer product coming into the market even before the infrastructure is ready. They will wait for that. This is where the deeper understanding about the market and the countries would help. Once you are clear about the understanding about the market, the legal framework, product positioning, everything, then you will be able to decide on that. And that's one of the reason I mentioned from the beginning. It looks attractive, but you need a careful assessment of what to do, where to play, and how to win in that market.
I saw this in China. This was many years ago when everyone saw China as obviously a billion plus people, a billion plus consumers. It's going to be easy market. But I think many foreign companies really failed for many different reasons. One of which is because obviously they didn't understand the local mindset, the local consumers. And so they misinterpreted, like I said, on paper, massive opportunities, but they weren't actually able to capitalize for the most part. So I'm seeing that now in Indonesia. Companies are trying to enter Indonesia simply because of the sheer population size. But few have been able to actually make a dent in it because I think of the complexities of and entering the market. So yeah, that I think once again, it may seem great on paper. Once you go in there, it's often much more challenging.
My biggest learning was in African countries. I think it was in Nigeria maybe 10, 15 years back. We were trying to enter Nigeria for a floor pad, which is basically a cleaning product for the floors. Our standard packaging for the floor pad was 5. We were trying to sell that 5 package, and then no one was willing to buy because of the affordability and the price point. Then when we went into the market, we were surprised to see that some of the local manufacturers, the African manufacturer, they sell the pad, single pad to the consumers. And because the market can afford those single pad, but when you start selling 5 pads in a pack, they won't be able to afford it. These cleaners are normal daily wage workers. They take a pad and they go and do the jobs. So that was one of the biggest learning for me, was trying to introduce the same product. It doesn't really help. Then we had to customize the product for the market. Our packaging had to be changed. The labels will have to be changed. And then the training and development needs to be continuous, because they need to see why they are paying slightly higher price for your product as compared to what is available. So that comes with the training, development, and showing them the differentiated quality that you can offer. It doesn't happen overnight, but it takes time.
You bring up a good point. I'm a big proponent of education,
Yeah.
educating the market and your products and services. What are some ways in to do that? Because you talked about one of which is obviously educate them on quality versus competitors. But what are other ways in which you can educate? Is there a way to educate them before you actually enter the market such that there's demand is there without having frontline sales forces too early?
Test the market when you are there, trying to do some training before your product is introduced, it's unlikely that you will be able to get the same results. So I think for me, the starting point would be to try and understand what the market can afford, competitive products and product positioning, start training and development. Because one of the critical factors for these emerging markets will be the local talents, because they will know the market better than anyone else. You are trying to understand the market sitting in Europe or US, it's not going to happen. So I think the local talent would be important for two things. One is for cultural sensitivity, which most of the time we often overlook the cultural sensitivity when we enter the emerging market, and local knowledge, the local insight. So once we have those insight, we should be able to design the training and development that we would need to customize it for those countries. Because you might have a training and development program for emerging advanced economies that may not work for the emerging markets. You will have to customize it because their understanding of the product, their understanding about the technicality and all that can be significantly different from the advanced economies. That's a challenge.
I've done some work with that with different tech companies on going to these specific markets. And it's a two-way street where you're educating them, but you're also finding out what the market wants and you can tweak things
Yeah.
on the positioning side or the product side. So I think that helps out a lot. And then what are your thoughts on cultural sensitivities? And I was speaking to someone recently and they said, is that really an issue anymore? Should we actually be talking about it because the world is so globalized and it's so small? But have you seen potential mistakes when it comes to cultural sensitivities in your previous works?
I think there are few areas that one need to be little more sensitive. And one could be your cultural sensitivity in terms of the labeling of the product because of the local regulations and all that. Second one could also be because their first language may not be English. So when you're translating the product, it should not create any confusion or any sensitivity around the cultural things. So I think even though we are living in a globally connected world, but we don't use a unified language. So I think when it comes to cultural sensitivity on the product packaging, the labeling, the marketing campaigns, and brand positioning, a lot needs to be done. The internet is widely available, it's a connected world, but that doesn't mean that you have a very good understanding about what you can do and what you cannot do in those countries. Good example can be Indonesia and Saudi Arabia. Some of the countries, there is a mandatory requirement for specific labels. We might be overlooking on those areas.
Good reminder. Going back once again, when I was in China, we would spend weeks sometimes working with the client on developing their Chinese brand name. It had a massive impact. Consumers felt more attached to that. So there's a lot of love and attention, obviously speaking to the locals as well as the foreign clients, just to figure out what's the right fit for that market. Otherwise, there was many issues where they just threw it out there and then it flopped because it didn't resonate with the local audience. Yeah, stuff like that, I agree. Unless you're on the ground and feel it, it's difficult. Even if you're doing a search, for me, it's not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. There are complex names for the product complexity on the product name, for instance. In Latin America, that could say something else, whereas in Japan, it might say something different. So we will have to be very careful on positioning the product. And also some of those complex words, people may not understand it. So keep it simple when it comes to emerging market. Try to align with the local culture, try to align with the local regulations. I think it makes your life much more easier.
Absolutely. And last time we were talking about markets you're excited about. We talked about Vietnam, Indonesia, some parts of Africa. Take me through those markets where you're most excited about in terms of opportunities, and why do you think they're so attractive from a business point of view?
I think if I take a look at the emerging markets, definitely India will be one of them, with a significant investment that is coming into India with focus on manufacturing, focus on technology hub, and definitely there is an opportunity here. If I look at the Southeast Asian countries, I think Vietnam is definitely one of my favorite country and for investment, and I always talk about Vietnam And then we are seeing a lot of investment going into Indonesia, but being a big country with a more than 250 million population, I think it's going to take time to develop that country because it's not going to be easy. Whereas Vietnam is much smaller than that, so it might be more easier for developing those. And also the skill set that is available in Vietnam is much more attractive. And then the countries like Philippines, we are seeing mainly because of the skill set that is available, you are seeing a lot of those GSCs or hubs setting up their bases in Philippines, and that will continue. If I take a look at the African countries, though Nigeria is the biggest, there are potential risks out there. But one area that really fascinated me was the Kenya, particularly on their M-Pesa, which is a mobile banking. The penetration in rural and penetration across the country was amazing. The digital transformation there is really fascinating. It's not attracting a lot of investment at the moment because of the instability and all that. But I think that market could also be one of the big market that we can look into. When I look at the North African countries, I think Morocco is definitely on my radar, or even Egypt is looking at a lot of investment. Of course, there is a bit of instability due to the current ongoing conflict. But I think once we are coming out of that, those markets could also see potential investment coming into key sectors, whether it is in artificial intelligence, healthcare, or even infrastructure. So you're going to see a good development. Latin America, I think Mexico is attracting a lot of investment. I think Mexico will definitely come out as one of the most potential Latin American countries.
I think strategic locations.
It's not discounting China. China has got tremendous potential and also a lot of challenges at the moment. But China has definitely advanced in healthcare, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and manufacturing. China is in a different ballgame today.
I think they're quite similar in Singapore in that respect, in that they're really focusing on the high tech development, like you said, from energy to healthcare to automotive. They're really spending resources on that, which is starting to come to fruition. So that's great. I'm curious, what are some of your go-to resources? How do you keep up to date on all the opportunities available?
There are a lot of external data that is available, whether it is the data published by the government or the external data that you can buy or that you can, in research data are available. I always use some of those data, whether starting with the World Bank reports, and then I use the Statistica and some of the other Oxford economics reports. So there are quite a few reports available. One just need to explore those areas, and then some of them are subscription basis, and some of them there are free research reports are also available. We use that. In my previous company, we used to buy those external data and we used to subscribe them. Then I always make it a point to attend. Networking is key to understanding the external landscape and all that. So whenever there is a networking event out there, and I make it a point to attend that. In fact, I'm attending today at 6 o'clock. There are a couple of them available for Middle East, and I will be attending those external speakers talking about specific like artificial intelligence, healthcare technologies, or electric vehicle. Yes.
A combination of reports, whether paid or free, as well as some of the networking and events going on.
Yeah, there is so much available there. It's basically pick and choose what you are comfortable with. Not all the reports are going to be equal, and some of them are very detailed, but some of them could be just at the high level.
Very good point. Now, is there anything I haven't asked you, any other tips or tricks when it comes to identifying, capitalizing on emerging markets?
No, I think starting with deeper understanding about the market, we talked about that. Taking a deeper look at the legal and regulatory compliance is really important. Follow the money, try and understand where the governments are investing. And then local partnership and networking is critical for your success, because identifying them would be challenging, but they would be part of the business success. Then I think last one would be the cultural sensitivity. Pay attention to cultural sensitivity. We talked about the business model, product, services, technology, and infrastructure. Sustainability is an area that one could leverage. The reason for that, emerging markets are looking at sustainability as a key initiative that they can leverage on that. Because the challenge in the advanced economies, it can take a lot of investment and time for aligning with the sustainability goals. For the emerging market, this could be a key advantage. They are trying to balance sustainability with the economic growth. We are already seeing that in some of the Southeast Asian countries. We have seen that in East European countries, and I don't see so much on the Latin America, but it could be an interesting to explore the emerging markets, have a mandate to drive sustainability and leverage on that. So those would be my high-level points here.
I think that's been a masterclass in a very short period of time on how to identify and capitalize on emerging markets. So thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your insights. I really appreciate it, Manohar.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to catch up.
Absolutely. For everyone watching and listening, share it. There's so many golden nuggets in here. Share it, and we'll see you on the next episode.